A rather alarming piece of news is being published by the outlet claiming that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has returned early from Germany due to the Russian offensive in the Sumy region. He was supposedly planning to stay for the award ceremony for Ursula von der Leyen and was supposed to remain in Berlin, but he urgently returned back. He flew back to Ukraine in order to coordinate what is happening in our country. Supposedly the Russians are advancing on the Sumy region and Zelensky rushed off and left. Later, sources reported that this was not true. No one rushed off anywhere. But still, the situation on the border between Ukraine and Russia, specifically in the Sumy region, needs to be discussed. Because there really is an escalation there, and Zelensky talked about it today. So let's discuss this topic together. My name is Aleksey Pechiy. This episode is being recorded on the night of the 28th, already turning into the 29th of May. So the information in this episode is up to date. Let's go through everything step by step now, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and write a comment under this episode. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we post up-to-date news and announcements of episodes on YouTube. So now let's go through everything step by step. Today, Der Spiegel, made a lot of noise, claiming that the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, urgently flew out of Berlin back to Ukraine because the situation in the Sumy region is escalating. Spiegel writes, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, refused to participate in the Charlemagne Prize award ceremony in Aachen and returned early from Germany to Kiev. The reason for the change of plans was the threat of a large-scale offensive operation by Russian troops in the Sumy region, where the occupiers captured several settlements the day before. According to Ukrainian data, the Russians have concentrated about 50,000 soldiers on the border with the region. This is reported by DER. Spiegel, we will come back to this. Zelensky planned to take part in the awarding of the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who this year became the laureate of a prestigious prize. In the year 2023, Zelensky himself, together with the Ukrainian people, was recognized as its recipient for the fight against Russian aggression. After official negotiations in Berlin, the head of the Ukrainian state was supposed to travel to Aachen via Düsseldorf, but on Tuesday his route changed. According to Der Spiegel, citing sources in the security services, the president decided to return to Kyiv immediately after the meetings in the German capital were concluded. The decision is related to growing concerns about Russian military preparations in the northeast of Ukraine. The Kremlin is expected to be preparing a full-scale offensive on the Sumy region. During his visit to Berlin, Zelensky held talks with Chancellor Friedrich Merz, which resulted in new promises of military aid to Ukraine. I recorded a separate episode about this, so I suggest you watch it on my YouTube channel. In addition, Zelensky met with the President of Germany, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, and the President of the Bundestag, Julia Klöckner. And as reported around 8 o'clock local time, the presidential plane departed from Berlin back to Ukraine after more than 11 hours spent in Germany. After that, news from sources appeared. Here, I should note that this is insider information that no, there was no urgent return of Zelensky. After that, the advisor to the president of Ukraine, in a conversation with journalists, denied the report by the German publication regarding the urgent return of Zelensky to Ukraine. Well, and Dmytro Litvin stated that Spiegel needs to be thoroughly checked regarding what exactly they are reporting. Well, supposedly there was no disruption and Zelensky did not urgently fly anywhere. Nevertheless, the situation on the border between Sumy Oblast and Russia is indeed tense. And today Zelensky stated in Berlin that Russia intends to prepare an offensive on Sumy. And here is his quote. Now in the Sumy direction they are amassing troops more than 50,000 further. Zelensky also confirmed the Russians' intention to create a so-called 10-kilometer buffer zone in the Sumy region, which would actually mean the occupation of new Ukrainian territories. Quote, I think they understand that they don't have these capabilities. It's not like that now, added Zelensky, noting that Moscow is constantly conducting offensive actions in the region, but so far has not managed to carry out a large-scale operation. According to Volodymyr Zelensky, the strongest group of the armed forces of the Russian Federation is located in the Kursk direction. At the same time, he mentioned the successes of the Ukrainian army and reported the capture of another 8 Russians in the Tetkino area. I think the quote on question is correct. Our troops did the right thing. They left one direction and entered another direction at question. Our forces have made good progress there. That means we will stay there until the Russians want to end the war or at least take the first step toward a ceasefire. In addition, Zelensky stated that at the same time, Russia is conducting offensives in other regions of Ukraine. Quote, "They will do everything to cross the administrative border of Dnipropetrovsk region. They want this. So far, they have not succeeded. They want to capture Pokrovsk, and they are taking consistent actions. Luhansk and Donetsk regions remain precisely those strategic objectives that have been set for them since 2014. Zelensky also reported on active combat operations in the Zaporizhzhia and Kherson directions. So, do they have unchanging goals? They have some fantasists who keep talking about a Kherson offensive operation across the river, but it's clear that these are just the ones talking. I'm not sure that in a sober state, Russians who don't care how many people die there, to force the river, we understand that such a thing in the Kherson region today is absolutely impossible. So, according to the data from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, in the past 24 hours there have been more than 200 combat clashes with Russian forces, the largest number in the Pokrovsk direction. Well, and here Russian officials, of course, are now trying to inflate this rhetoric of threats as much as possible. And the head of the Glushkovsky district of the Kursk region, Pavel Zolotaryov, at a meeting with the president of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, called for the capture of the entire Sumy region of Ukraine. So, this happened back on the 21st of May at a meeting between Putin and the heads of the municipalities of the Kursk region. And this Zolotaryov stated that Sumy should be ours. We can't live like on a peninsula. We should have more territory, at least Sumy. Many people have already laughed at this. But it's important to understand that the city of Sumy, located about 30 kilometers from the Russian border, is regularly shelled. And according to the project's data, there are no areas in the Sumy region occupied by Russian troops. The Russian army left it in March 2022 after the failed offensive on Kiev. At the same time, here you can consider different perspectives on what Russia is preparing in the Sumy region. For example, the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine states that this is Russian propaganda exaggerating the threat. According to the Center for Countering Disinformation, Russian propaganda traditionally inflates all this hysteria in order to obscure reality. Quote, "Of course, the fighting in the border areas is intense, and it's difficult there because of the significant number of enemy forces, but their capabilities are far from what Russian war correspondents claim." In addition, one of the military experts, the director of a public organization, this is Mikhail Samos, a respected and truly knowledgeable expert. He stated that he commented on these statements by Putin about the buffer zone. And according to him, this is not something new. After all, such intentions have been declared in Moscow more than once, which is a continuation of the Russian Federation's informational and psychological operation. Quote, "There are no buffer zones there and there won't be any. Attempts by Russians to attack Ukrainian territory are carried out constantly. Exactly a year ago, they attempted to attack the Kharkiv region, advancing 6 to 7 kilometers deep in the area of Volchansk. And a year later, we see that this is where it all ended." In addition, Samos says that the current events are a matter of countercourses since the Ukrainian defense forces are simultaneously entering the territory of Russia's Belgorod and Kursk regions. Both the armed forces of Ukraine and the Russian armed forces are trying to take the most advantageous positions in the border area from which they can exercise fire and operational control, including for conducting future operations. That is, taking control of commanding heights and using geographical features in order to prepare as effectively as possible for the next developments. And according to his assessment, right now there are not enough forces on the Russian border to advance deep into Ukraine. Well, the occupation of part of the Sumy border region does not yet give Moscow a tactical advantage. Quote, "They will try to move towards advantageous commanding heights. The Ukrainian army understands this, knows it, and will counteract it." So that's the situation in the Sumy region. And I think that Der Spiegel really twisted Zelensky's words a bit and presented it as if he urgently flew out of Germany, because some kind of tragedy could happen on the border of the Sumy region. So for now, I'll just leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode as usual. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.